So we came together, we had some common interests in how we help students to reflect on their learning and looking at their metacognition as a way of helping them to learn better. And so it's just a way of having them look at what they're doing, reflect upon it so that they can better themselves. We looked at the way we were going about doing it. We had various differences in when we're applying it from first year up through senior and how we were applying it. So we are looking at three aspects: collecting, mapping, and practical implementation. So the first thing we want to do is to collect the best practices to see what is working, and particularly what is working at different levels along their education, so that we could then map out the best way in which we could use it to help them throughout those different years.
So collecting would be the first thing. Once we had these best practices collected from across the country from educators, what we would want to do is map out what those reflective and metacognitive activities would look like. So when we were thinking about how to put this together, how to visualize this, we had the idea of the material science phase diagram, that at different levels you'd have different combinations of different alloys in your particular material. So here on our axes, what we have is the percent of reflective or metacognitive activities that you have in a particular content area, and then as you're going up the diagram, you're looking at different levels of student development. So you see kind of at the bottom level where we have the dotted line go across, we're focusing a little bit more, and this is kind of a hypothetical idea, but likely focusing more on personal or formulaic type of ideas. As we get midway through the curriculum, those start to phase out a little bit, and we're looking more at professional and design or open-ended types of ideas. And then when we're finishing out that curriculum, we're really looking at the integration of all of these ideas together, getting ready to send students out. So now what we'll do is define each one of these categories and how we would look at practical implementation.
Yeah, and to give you some examples, for example, my work is related to the personal student development in the freshman year. And so I'm focusing on reflection and metacognition exercises for the students so they can figure out, what am I doing? Does it help me to be successful as an engineering student? Is it helpful to be 2 hours on Facebook, or should I face a book for 2 hours, right? So that kind of personal development in the freshman year.
Another one is looking at the formulaic. So when they're doing equation-based problems that have fairly formulaic and set ways of going about performing it, looking at their self-reflecting through how confident are they? How well do they know that the answer they got is the correct answer? And so that would start out more in the beginning, and once they have those basics and they're confident in their answer, that gives way to some of the other types of learning.
So another category would be the professional development area. One example that I've used in my classes for reflection and metacognition in professional development is sending students to a department fair that we put on in our program, where all the departments come in and set up booths, and students can go and ask questions about the different majors that they're considering. So I prepare students by having them write a list of questions that they want to ask these different departments. Once they go to the department fair, they do a reflective exercise where then I ask them, what did you think you wanted to do when you went into the department fair? What were some of the questions that you got answered? Do you still want to do that, or have you changed your mind? And what really about that department fair made you switch to a different area?
Open-ended design problems are another really great opportunity for a lot of different kinds of reflection, even within that. Besides just having students reflect on maybe their final solution and how well it meets the needs of the client or the stakeholders, you can also have them reflect on their process, particularly the design process. Did they maybe come to a conclusion too early and not fully explore the design space, which is a common thing that happens? They can reflect on how they functioned as a team, if it's a team project, and other ideas like the iteration process. How could they have done that better? What did they learn from each step of the iteration?
And then, finally, the last part is the integration of all of these things. So I think I heard many of the presentations we saw today talk about how we want the students to understand the relevance of all the things that they're learning and understand kind of the context that the engineer plays in society. And so a lot of my work focuses on trying to show the students directly kind of an implicit realization of the relevance of what we're trying to train them in doing by bringing in real data, and I have them bring in design codes, and then bring those two things together and actually use formulas and equations that we're teaching them in class, and then it becomes evident to them that this is actually part of the practice of engineering. And so with all those things together, we'll wrap up here with our 3 components, and we'd like you to take a meta moment here to reflect on these 3 questions, and then we'll be glad to take any questions from you. Thank you.
I like the idea, the challenge of the reflection. As engineers, we're very good at quantitative analysis and providing feedback that this is best because this number is larger, this number is smaller. We're not trained explicitly in the feedback that would come from the reflection, and is there a way to map the feedback that we need to give in something more complex than a rubric that's not just checking boxes for the students, but can offer them the insights and their growth that we're looking for from the reflection?
Well, what I think is important is that the reflection is about the students themselves. So you don't necessarily need to create them, right? It's about the students need to analyze themselves and see and get that aha moment, which they wouldn't get if you don't assign that reflection exercise, right? And it's always important because I always emphasize it's about you. It's about the students. And you write about yourself. You're not writing to me because I don't want to have them write something they perceive I want to see as the creator, right, as the instructor, that they get an A, right? No, that's the important part. It should be about the students.
Yeah, another thing I'll say is I wouldn't necessarily, so you said other than a rubric, what are options for doing this? And I don't think I would necessarily so quickly throw out the idea of rubric if you're going to give them some sort of feedback. If you're really putting in the effort that you need to clearly define a rubric that has some amount of depth, that's actually a really powerful tool. And it's not only good for you for looking at the quality of what students have done, but it gives them, number one, a framework for them to start thinking about in what way should I start developing my reflective habits, and number two, how did I do and what could I improve for the next time? So I actually think rubrics are really powerful. They take a long time to develop, so clearly identifying those learning objectives ahead of time really help in that development. And that's actually one of the tools that I try to use the most when I think about these things is rubrics. And you don't have to look at it on a number scale. It doesn't have to be number, but it is that feedback area.
Would you say that having the students determine their learning style would qualify as being a self-reflection exercise?
Yes. Okay. Particularly if they then also reflect on what does that mean and what does that mean for how they should approach their classes and their studying. So one of the reflections that I think all 3 of us have them do in a freshman seminar class is to take a learning styles inventory and then also go through some of the helpful tips and adaptations and talk about which ones they think they can implement and which ones they need to work on to really sort of assess where they are on each of those things.
So following up on that idea, I guess my question is related to how do you avoid this issue of like students feeling, look, I'm in college, take your hands off me, I'm not in high school anymore, you know, which I have gotten in my reviews, like, oh, this guy is just, trying to treat us as if we are still in high school because these rubrics, these reflections, those things, conferences, they are sort of like, oh, they should stay out at the K-12 level. Now I am in college, let me do whatever I want to do.
So one thing I'll say, and it might be a little bit ugly to say, but one thing you can do is let them fail their first exam, and then they really realize how much they need you. And many times it's not until, you have some students that come in and realize, hey, I need a lot of help, I need a lot of support to figure out what I'm going to do moving forward. And sometimes you have that oh crap moment when you really realize that there are other tools and skills that you need other than just plugging in information into a formula and deriving something. And so sometimes it is letting them have that first failure that then they decide on their own what they need for you. So you can't force a student to do anything, but what you can do is let them come to that realization on their own, and they will utilize what they feel is necessary, and if they choose not to, that is a choice that they have to make as an adult. So, yeah.
I would also add that I actually try to use the fact that they're in college, and that you may have developed your ways of working as a high school student and gotten them to work really well, but the context and the situation is changing now. So this is a time in their lives when they're really having to make a lot of adaptations, and I think it's important to just be upfront with them about that. That they probably are going to have to continue to adapt and think about their processes, and what worked really well in high school may not work in college anymore. Are you all reflecting right now?